Hi everyone, this is Gaurav from Business Analysis Upskill. If you are considering a career as a business analyst, or you're just curious to know what business analysts do and how do they capture and analyze requirements, then this video is for you. We'll cover this with a simple example so things become clear to you. By the end of this short video, you will have a reasonably good understanding of the importance and the role of business analysts in any organization, the techniques that generally business analysts use to gather and analyze requirements, and also how do business analysts write functional requirements, non-functional requirements, or even user stories in agile environments. So let's get started. So here's a bank, a new bank called ABC Bank, and it wants to put together an internet banking website for its users. Now the bank is a commercial entity and it understands its banking business. What it doesn't understand most likely is the technology aspects of it. How would technology or this technical solution support their internet banking? So they hire a group of technical people to do some design and develop their internet banking technical solution. Now here's a little problem. Whilst the technology team understands how to do the design and development of the website, including how to set up the infrastructure, the programming involved, configuration, setup, and all the other things that go with it, what they don't understand is a bunch of things. Which devices would the website or this internet banking solution be available from? What browsers would it be supported on? How would the website layout look like? What functions or features this internet banking solution would provide? So on and so forth. On the other side, the business users from the bank understand the business aspects. What they don't understand is the technology aspects. So here's where business analysts come in. So business analysts work like a bridge between the business as well as the technology team. They understand the requirements from a business perspective and articulate them in a way that the technology team understands and can accordingly design and develop the solution. Now, in order to understand the requirements from the business users and pass it on to the technology or the solution team, the business analysts need to elicit requirements from the business users. There are many mechanisms and techniques available, such as workshops, interview sessions, surveys, or even focus groups or brainstorming if you're solving a specific problem. There's many available techniques that BAs use to understand the requirements from the business, articulate them, model them, further analyze them, and then understand the functional and non-functional requirements, then pass it on to the technology or the solution team, who understand it and then accordingly program or come up with the technology solution. So in terms of running workshops, interviews, or doing surveys with your stakeholders are those people you deal with from the business. They are your stakeholders. So BAs or business analysts typically work with their stakeholders to understand these requirements. When you do workshops and interviews with your stakeholders, what you first try to understand is the current state, or how does the business currently function. You call it as is. The current state is called as is. How is the business currently functioning? What have they got in place to offer to the users? In our case, the ABC Bank, the current state of the environment within the bank is that they don't have any internet banking solution. So you first understand and gain an idea of the current environment. Then business analysts work with the stakeholders to define what's called as a 2B state or the future state. The business wants to go from the current state to the future state. So the job of a business analyst is to understand how they can move from the current environment to the future environment or the future state, and then understand what their requirements are in the desired future state or in the 2B environment. Now there are many techniques available for business analysts to drive the conversations with their stakeholders and understand what the requirements are for the desired future state. Use case models or use case diagrams, process model diagrams, data models, state transition models, decision models, so on and so forth. There are many techniques available to define the requirements in the future state. So let's say you have made some use case models or made some process flow diagrams by talking to your stakeholders and understanding what exactly they want done in the future state. In our case, it's an internet banking system. So typically the kind of information that you would have captured as part of those elicitation sessions or requirements gathering sessions with your stakeholders would be things like how should the website look like? What should be the different ways in which the information should be displayed on your website? What are the functions or features that the internet banking solution should provide? Things like which payment mechanisms are available, can you list your accounts, which accounts will be visible to which users, what access permissions have you got, what kind of data can you export out of the website, what are your login requirements, your password requirements, which specific devices, handheld devices or iPads, gadgets, and which other devices can this internet banking solution be accessed from, so on and so forth. So you capture all those requirements through those workshops, interview sessions, surveys, and such other mechanisms, and then you come up with this big list of your requirements. Now, some of these requirements are functional requirements and some are non-functional requirements. Functional requirements define the function of this system or this new internet banking system that you're going to offer to your users. What are the functions of this system? Things like it should be able to offer you checking your bank accounts. It should allow you to make payments. It should allow you to download certain transaction history, so on and so forth, are the functions or the features of this system. On the other hand, the non-functional requirements describe the quality of this system. For example, if any given point in time, 20,000 users are connected on your website, should the system fall over or should it function? What's the expected user load on your system? So let's say as a user, someone is trying to access their account history and trying to export all the transactions in the last 6 months. Now at the same point, there are a bunch of other users, let's say 500,000 or a million other users geographically distributed within or outside the same country who are accessing their own transactions history, and they're also trying to export their transactions all at the same time. Now the system should be able to concurrently support all these service requests from all these users who are geographically distributed and accessing the internet banking solution at the same time. The system should not fall over. This is a non-functional requirement. Again, if you were trying to download your transaction history and it takes more than 3 seconds to download, then that doesn't look good on the part of the system. So that's another non-functional requirement. Here's some typical examples of non-functional requirements for an internet banking solution. So what have you done now? You have captured functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So now once you have captured these requirements, both functional and non-functional requirements, you have to store and capture them somewhere so that you can access those requirements, you can manage them, update them, delete them, retire them, and whatnot. So how do you store and access and manage those requirements? You could do that even with simple tools like Word, Excel, and so on and so forth. Or you could use sophisticated software such as Jira or Jama software, which are specifically designed to capture and manage your requirements. So let's say here's a list of many functional requirements that you have captured. So there's a functional requirement 1, functional requirement 2, functional requirement 3, and so on. Now, not all the requirements are equally important or critical to any business, and you can't achieve all those requirements being developed and designed at the same time within the time frames and the budgets you've got. So as a business analyst, you also work with the business, in our case the banking business users, to understand which of those requirements you have captured are the topmost ones in terms of their priority. So you prioritize each requirement. This is how your functional requirements once prioritized look like. There's many ways to prioritize them. You could call them as a high priority, medium priority, low priority, or then use something called as a Moscow matrix, which helps you understand and define those priorities as a must have, should have, could have. As in, is this a must have requirement and we cannot live without this requirement? Or it's a should have, as in it's not must, but it's an important one. Now, once you have captured your functional and non-functional requirements and you have also prioritized them, there's another step that generally BAs do. So business analysts also attach specific metadata or attributes to these requirements so that these requirements get tagged and they can be searchable on the basis of those metadata. Some of the common examples of these metadata are things like priority. It's also metadata that talks about the requirement as to what its priority is. Another one could be author. Who is the one who is the author or the main source for this requirement? Which business team owns this requirement or is eventually accountable for the requirement? What's the risk associated with this requirement? So risk is another metadata. Status is another attribute of metadata for requirements. Status could mean things like, has this requirement been approved? Is it still being discussed? Has it been retired? Is it no longer needed? Or has it been deferred for a future point? Once you have captured these requirements and even tagged them with metadata, then your job as a business analyst is to seek approval from the relevant people in your business. So for the internet banking system that you're designing, now you've captured those functional and non-functional requirements. Your job would be to get approval for those requirements. Or if there are any changes required to your requirements, then you have to incorporate those requirement changes as well. We have talked about traditional way of capturing functional requirement and writing non-functional requirements. In case you're working as a BA on an agile project, then the concept of functional requirement doesn't come into picture. You still capture requirements, but you call it as user stories. In our example of this internet banking system for the users, a typical user story would be what a user wants from this internet banking system. So on an agile environment, instead of writing functional requirements, you would write user stories. In our internet banking system example, a typical user would like to access the internet banking system to check their account balance or make some payments to someone. So here are some examples of user stories written in an agile environment for the same internet banking system. On an agile environment, a list of all these user stories is maintained as a product backlog. And these backlog items or these user stories are prioritized typically like functional requirements are. We discussed about the role of business analysts in terms of capturing requirements from the business teams and passing it on to the technology or the solution development team. But this is not all that the BAs do. Business analysts do other activities as well, such as writing business cases, participating in change management activities, undertaking user acceptance testing for business users. Some technical business analysts do system upgrade analysis, data migration analysis, or impact assessments to systems and solutions. The more senior business analysts work on strategic analysis or define product requirements for a new product. Hopefully this gives you some idea about what business analysts do. In this short video, we looked at how business analysts bridge the gap between the business team and the technology team and how they capture both functional and non-functional requirements or agile user stories for the business users and articulate them in a way that the technology or the solution team is able to use them and develop effective solutions. Thank you for your time. I offer training courses to cover each of these concepts and much more in more details. I'll see you in one of my training courses. Bye for now.